Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, that's Sanford Hess, and this is Real Reviews Rewind, the show where we rewind the clock and talk about films from the past. Sometimes we talk about films in the present, but we're going to talk about two films thematically, because even though Valentine's Day is come and gone, we're talking about marriage in its ultimate two forms. First, in the form of the new film Ready or Not, starring Samara Weaving, and we've got also When Harry Met Sally, a classic romantic comedy. And now you may say, what do these two films have to do with each other?
What do these two films have to do with each other?
They're all about the sacrifices of marriage. How you get there and how you leave.
All right. We're going to delve on that one.
Right. So the first film is Ready or Not. And it's directed by Tyler Gilpin.
Oh, you went in the opposite order.
Yeah,
yes. That's one.
And
Mark Bettinelli Open.
Bettinelli Open, yes.
Sorry, Mark, if we mangled your name.
Yes. The premise of this film is that a couple is having their wedding day at a giant, kind of spooky mansion, where a woman is marrying her husband, Alex, and he has a very rich family with a dark secret. Don't they all have dark secrets? And she is asked, as family tradition, to play a game. She has to choose the game. The game ends up being a child's game of hide and seek, and she...
Wait, let me clarify. When you say choose, she draws a card, essentially, that tells what the game is.
Correct.
So it's not like she chose hide and seek.
No, but if she chose hide and seek herself, she'd be even more screwed than she was throughout the film. So she gets hide and seek out of random selection from this history book. Or no, not a history book. It's a sliding card deck that actually plays
it's like
the
a
game
magic deck
on
of
the
cards.
card.
Yeah.
So she gets hide and seek and quickly finds out hide and seek isn't normal hide and seek. It's basically hide and kill. And she's the one that they have to kill before sunrise, or the deal with the devil that was initiated will come after the family who's made their millions off this wealth of games that they created. Here's the thing. I should, by all rights, hate this movie. I'm not really a horror fan, except for when it's really well made. And the thing is, Samara Weaving, who played the quote-unquote final girl that you'd see in horror movies, is electric. She's resourceful. She's constantly, not doing the dumb things you would think people would do. And she's smart. You can tell that before the wedding actually happened, she had a life with this guy. And the guy who plays Alex, major credit to him up until the final minutes for being pretty much the most likable antagonist I've ever seen on screen. The rest of the film features actors that are basically hit or miss. Andy McDowell, Adam Brody are really recognizable, great names, but they're pretty much wasted here except for Adam Brody. Adam Brody really gives the film its, I'm in this movie, I don't give a crap that I'm in this movie, but I need to sell it, and he sells it really well.
He plays Daniel, the brother of Alex?
Right, correct.
Okay.
And I really love the dynamic between Alex, Samara Weaving's character.
Well, Grace is her name.
Grace, right. Why did I forget Grace?
Grace and Alex, yeah.
Grace and Alex. I love that kind of dynamic between all three of them together. They really sell the movie, and if they weren't in the movie or other actors were chosen instead, I'd probably be pretty upset because this movie would not have done so well for me. What did you think about it, Sanford?
I felt like this one was a little disappointing to me because the good reviews coming into it had me excited for this movie. I'm a big horror fan. I think that for whatever reason, some of the best movies being made today are horror movies. And I'm not sure what that says. Maybe we want to come back to that later.
Yeah.
But I felt like, oh, okay, good. This is a, sort of an interesting proposition. But like you said, it's it's a classic archetype of final movies. She is the girl who is going to survive through to the end of the movie, you think, or at least you hope.
You hope.
But she's our protagonist. I did find the movie likable, but it was kind of like light and fluffy and there wasn't much there. And by the end of the movie, it was kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess that kind of wound up in a kind of predictable way, although I have a complaint about the ending we'll talk about.
I mean, I just enjoyed it for what it was. My main problem with the film has nothing to do with the characters or the story, just that it's straight up too dark. Like, the actual shooting of it is too dark.
Oh, interesting, from a lighting perspective. From
a lighting perspective, you don't see enough of everything for context to really fully come together within where she's hiding, why she's hiding, where she's hiding, all those things. The hallways.
You watched it at home.
Yeah, I watched it at home. And the lighting is my main issue for a couple of reasons, because the way they shot the night scenes, it was really dark. I don't know whether that's because of the fact that I watched it at home, or whether when you saw it in the theater it appeared dark to you.
I didn't remark on that. I mean, I did see it at the theater. I think that, at home, depending on how much daylight is on, your TV, the contrast, et cetera, so that could be part of it. But, I mean, I guess I'd have to go back and see how it looked, but I wasn't aware of that. But it does take place at night, so I could see where they would choose to light it differently. And these, potentially were not very experienced directors, and may have underlit the nighttime scenes.
And the second thing that bothered me, and since you bring it up, is the angles. The angles at which they shot everything kind of bothered me a little bit.
So that, to me, I have like a thing that when a director gets their first movie, they have a tendency to throw everything into it. There's some cool shots in this movie, but I was aware of that too, that there's a lot of extreme angles, there's a lot of unnecessary stuff that sort of says, hey, look, we got money to make a movie, we're going to do every cool shot we learned about in film school. Mm-hmm. And this movie has a little bit of that.
And my other problem with it is none of the kills are really that inventive, for me at least.
Yeah.
That's really where it comes up trumps for me, is that, like, if you're gonna kill people in a horror movie, make it be something that is not forgettable. Where you look at it and say, oh, how did they do that? Right. I want to be surprised and excited. Not, you've given us a clue about which thing you're going to use to kill which person. Like the butler, for sure, they were giving clues how he was going to die.
Yeah, but I do like the fact that they sort of they had a rule in effect within the sort of game within the movie that they had to use weapons that were available dating back to like the 18-somethings when they started this.
Right.
Because I love the scene where they're shooting at her outside and the woman takes her gun and points it at her and it sort of goes, whoa, I just love that they're actually backing up and saying, okay, we have to use, the one woman has this giant battle axe.
Yeah.
And does use it, but so I just, that part I kind of enjoyed. There's a little bit of, I agree with you that the kills were not that inventive, but maybe the weapons were interesting. It wasn't just, somebody with some slasher film with a knife or something like that.
I will give the film credit for one awesome scene where she's hiding literally in a haystack and is discovered by one of the younger members of the family, and she thinks, oh, okay, I'm safe, and he shoots her in the hand. That's just great. Like, yeah. The last thing you would expect negative to happen, and she gets shot in the hand. It's so
that one was pretty good, and I thought that fed nicely into the plot of sort of her survival, because from that point forward, obviously, she's been shot in the hand.
Yeah.
Where up to that point, she had sort of escaped any serious injury. But definitely by the end of the movie, she's accumulated a series of injuries.
And it's kind of a callback to what they did at the very beginning of the movie, where they were, spoiler alert, they look back at this game 30 years ago, and you basically see Alex, the main character, out somebody from where
No, that was Daniel. was the one because
Oh,
Alex
that was
was
Daniel. Okay.
Daniel, he hid Alex so that Alex would not see the violence, and then Daniel was the one who.
Oh, I didn't get that.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair
Because
enough.
they talked about how, as the older brother, he sort of protected him.
Oh.
So before we segue along to the other movie, quickly about the ending. I'll
Okay.
tell you my complaint.
What'd you not like?
I did not like the way that Alex was a stand-up guy for 3/4 of the movie.
Thank you.
And then suddenly, without sufficient explanation of why his character chose to behave so differently, flipped.
And the weird thing is, he didn't really fully flip.
Yeah, he wasn't committed to it. He just sort of acted in that way.
Eh.
Yeah, to me, I was thinking about it. I was like, well, what would I have done differently? I felt like they could have just killed him and the movie could have proceeded fine. It would have made more sense. I wouldn't have been distracted by his character if he had sort of died along the way and then the rest of the family continued hunting her.
I would have felt better if they pulled. Have you ever seen the movie Frozen?
No.
Okay. Spoiler alert from the movie Frozen.
No, don't spoil Frozen for me. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
At the end of Frozen, basically Anna, the brown-haired, sweet, naivety sister who really loves this prince, wants to marry him. And that guy turned out to be a complete horrible person and basically try to kill her by not helping her survive from whatever she's ailing from. I felt like, and it's one of those turns where he was evil the whole time, and you're like, oh, but I hadn't been paying attention to that. He wasn't a Gaston throughout the movie, so I wasn't really thinking about him being evil. If he had, when he grabbed her to put his hand over her mouth and been like, I wanted to be the one to do it, then I would have been like, oh, you're doing this as a way to gain favor back into your family. Then I would have understood. But that didn't happen. It was a fake out.
Yeah, I'm always like, I will buy into your cinematic universe as long as it's internally consistent.
Yeah,
you can put any kind of crazy stuff in front of me as long as the characters stay true to themselves. I did not feel like that was part of his character.
It had to be coherent, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I liked the film up until that point. That was the thing where I was like, nope.
I liked the film, again, it was just kind of light and fun for me. There's a lot of blood in this movie, but it's from a horror perspective, I guess you're anxiously concerned for her, but, it was enough of a comedy that it wasn't really scary.
Right.
And the tone, and I'll say that actually as a compliment, the tone was kind of consistent throughout, as sort of balancing horror and comedy. It wasn't like it was veering crazily from one to the other. It was kind of this nice blend the whole time.
Right. And Alex and Grace were likable people.
Very.
Especially from the right beginning, when you see them get married, you're like, these people have chemistry.
Absolutely. The first scene, the first sort of 10 minutes where they're, the pre-marriage conversation they're having.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. They had great chemistry. You say to yourself, these are people I want to root for. And I hope they survive this movie.
Exactly. And by the end...
Bless you. So one last thing on this movie I want to give kudos to. I love the title. Ready or Not is a great horror movie title. You mentioned just before we started taping that there is already a movie called Hide and Seek.
Right.
But I'm so glad they went with this title. It's a great title. Ready or Not.
Yeah, because it's kind of like the ultimate surprise. It kind of pulls the surprise on you.
Yeah.
So,
So speaking of ultimate surprises... So I get this text from Chike that there was another movie we were planning to talk about. And Chike says, no, I got to change it on you. We need to talk about When Harry Met Sally because it has a thematic, similarity to Ready or Not.
Right. So from one horrible marriage and horror to another, in my mind, horrible marriage and horror, which would be the relationship between Harry and Sally and When Harry Met Sally, directed by Rob Reiner. Starring Billy Crystal, Meg Ryan, Carrie Fisher. Am I missing anybody else?
Bruno Kirby,
who...
Yeah, that's it. They're they're the four stars in the beginning, so those are the key ones.
Yeah. I have a deep affection for this film personally. I first saw it, no judgment, people who watch the show. I first saw it with my sister, and we absolutely could not stop laughing at the absurdity of these two people who seem so unlikable in the beginning. And the premise is simple. Harry is doing a favor for a friend in college and taking this woman Sally to her college dorm. They have to do basically
Well, hang on, no. We'll just do some fact checking here. It's the end of the year. They're going to New York. She's driving to New York, and Harry is riding home because he needs a ride home to New York.
No, it's the reverse. I swear it's the reverse.
It's her car.
Oh, that's true. Okay. Yeah, so Sally is giving Harry a ride home. And basically the two of them hate each other the whole time. And you're thinking, how are these people going to get together? Like, they spend the entire time fighting, and by the end of it, they're okay. They can stand each other, and that's kind of where it ends. They have all these disagreements about the dynamics between men and women and what life is. Really good existential conversations that people in 2019 would never have.
Right.
And they come away with a mutual understanding. What is it, 10 years later?
5 years later, they meet again.
5 years later, they meet again, and they kind of strike up a friendship because they're like wondering.
No, you're skipping the middle one.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I love the.
I'll refresh Chike on this one.
Yeah, go for the refresher because I'm missing something.
5 years later, they meet again on an airplane flight, essentially. Turns out, actually, there's a fun scene just before that. In the airport, Harry doesn't recognize her.
That's true.
He recognizes her boyfriend. Sure. She remembers Harry, but he does not immediately place her until they're on the flight and he hears her place a drink order. And then that clicks for him who it is. So then they have this sort of short interaction, and again, very negative. He's kind of unlikable. She's a little uptight. They don't hit it off.
A little uptight, very uptight.
She's a little uptight. So they don't hit it off the second time either. And then the movie flashes forward 5 more years.
Oh, so that's what I'm missing. I always like the middle part so much that I kind of blank out all the negative of the bad. Other than the fact that, like, in the beginning they don't like each other at all. I always get to the next 5 years, and I want to point out that throughout them knowing and meeting each other, there are interviews with other couples who are married, explaining what married life is and what compromise is and all these values as you jump back to things that Harry and Sally are doing. So for me...
And then Harry and Sally eventually hit it off.
Yeah, they become friends, and then she realizes she likes him, and Harry realizes he likes Sally, and it becomes weird because they realize they like each other, they act on it, and then they immediately feel guilty for acting on it, and then it becomes this thing where they're still friends, but they're weird around each other until they realize, no, this is who I want to be with for the rest of my life. And it's all soundtracked by Harry Connick Jr. singing different standards and being his charming New Orleans self. It's basically his big break as well as theirs.
It was.
So the reason I like this movie is it shows the horrors of relationships, just like Ready or Not showed the horrors of that relationship.
Okay.
I feel like
I think it's worth noting that there's many relationships that they are in besides the one with each other throughout the movie. They're friends for a decent chunk of the movie.
I agree.
And dating other people, and so you hear them complaining about their dating lives.
And they're getting advice. They're getting advice from those friends as well. Like, I feel like this works. I feel like this doesn't work. And it feels natural. That's the one major joy I can give this movie, is that it feels really natural. I love the chemistry between Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. I mean, it's undeniable. I'm mad that they really don't work together and that Billy Crystal didn't become more of a leading man. I think after the City Slickers happened?
Yes.
After this, he does City Slickers, which I have a huge problem with. But he was really good in the film. She was really good in the film. It's about love and it's about compromise and people's lack of willing to compromise. And I'm going to reference the end of Ready or Not for this.
All right.
Because Alex wanted Grace to compromise, and she's like, I want a divorce. So here's the thing. Love is a tangled web. And the reason I liked both of these films together is both films demonstrated how tangled a web love is. In some ways, it can be really, really messed up, as in Ready or Not. And in some ways, it can be charming and effective and great. I honestly want to know what you thought of When Harry Met Sally. It's been a while since you've seen it as well.
Yes, I mean, I've probably seen the movie at least 5 times in my life. I'm gonna guess.
Okay.
So I watched it last night, and tried to watch it with fresh eyes.
Right.
And also watched it, at least part of it, with my son, who's 13.
Ooh, that would have been an interesting experience.
Yeah, he came in a little bit late, but he wound up watching most of it. And then my wife came in and out because she's a big fan of the movie too. So my thoughts on watching this all over again were, first of all, the comedy. I mean, there's some moments of just sublime timing.
Yes.
And well played gags. I mean, they're gags. They're written as gags. The one early in the film, when they're driving from Chicago to New York, and they stop at a restaurant, and they start to have a conversation outside, and then he sort of tells her that she hasn't had great sex. And then they walk into the restaurant, and she says, in an extremely loud voice, I have had great sex, and the whole place goes quiet. Yeah. And I'm marveling in Meg Ryan's comic timing in that moment. And the look on her face, which is just, it was just pitch perfect, in terms of playing that scene. And I think, that speaks to great script, great directing, good stars, rehearsal. I don't see a lot of comedies these days that have that right, sort of level of quality. Most comedies these days are, they're so far out there in terms of being, I'm just thinking of like the Hangover movies and things like that, where it's just so extreme on the comedy side. You just don't see enough of that well-crafted work that I was treasuring that, Plus, Billy Crystal, he's so likable in this movie, but to a great extent, he's just sort of being his stage presence.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I do have to discount that a little bit because, it's not hard for him to be likable and funny because, hello, he's a likable comedian.
Yeah.
So.
But I feel like if you replace Billy Crystal, that might be interesting. If you replace Billy Crystal with Michael Keaton, does the movie work?
Yes, and in fact it would work, but it would not work as well because Michael Keaton is a little too Hollywoody, a little too leading man. I think part of what works well in this movie is that Meg Ryan is a little bit beyond his character's grasp from a sort of attractiveness match or even from a personality. He's, especially in the beginning of the movie, he's a more negative person. And she's truly not attracted to him.
And you wouldn't believe that with Michael Keaton. You'd be like, he looks good enough that eventually she's going to come around. But for Billy Crystal, it's like, nah, he really doesn't ring my bell in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And I think that's what makes it compelling is that they're very, very, very opposite each other. Just like, in a way, Alex and Grace were in Ready or Not.
But I don't know, because in the first scene of the movie, they seem to be very much on the same page. So I guess there's an interesting point, is Ready or Not starts with these two characters who are already in a wonderful dynamic, and then things go wrong from there, whereas Harry Met Sally goes the opposite. Two people who start off on a very bad foot and slowly reach that point of being, good together. Right.
And that's the pendulum swing I was kind of going for. Oh. The horrors and delights of relationships and marriage and how the differing ideals can really shape how a film gets either a really positive reaction or a really negative one. And that's kind of how I felt about Ready or Not. I was positive pretty much all the way through it until that one really big negative thing happened at the end that really slid me away from it. I was on the negative end when I started watching When Harry Met Sally.
Really?
Yeah, because I was
the first time, or like since then?
no both first time and since then.
Really?
Because I don't like the way he basically talks down to Sally throughout that first half of the film.
But his character needs to grow. I mean, he grows as a person over the course of
I
10
agree,
years.
but it just feels really disrespectful to just be like, you're never ever going to be right. And he's making really broad assumptions.
Yeah, well,
like,
he's a 22-year-old guy, at least in the movie. So
true.
You know, I mean, yes, you're right. Well, I mean, so, you know, there's an example. You know, men and women can't be friends. That is an incredibly broad assumption. Is it true?
It depends on the friendship and how well the two of you know and trust each other. I have a friend that I've been friends with since second grade. It's never gone past friendship, and I've never really wanted it to. So, yes, it is possible, but it depends on what your dynamic is.
Okay, fair point. So, to me, you know, again, it's, but also I guess the other aspect of that is that Ready or Not essentially takes place in a less than 24-hour timeline.
Right.
Whereas Harry Met Sally takes place over 10 plus years, probably 11 or 12 years by the time the whole movie's gone by.
Yeah, so there's your growth is really sped up with Ready or Not, and it's really slowed down with When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah.
So in a way, these two opposites really did attract.
Ah, what a great way to close it out.
And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you in a few weeks. This is Chike Coleman, and that is Sanford Hess. And this has been Real Reviews Rewind. We will see you at the movies. Bye, guys.